If you're thinking of building an electric guitar, the right router bits can make a huge difference in your work. We'll take a look at essential ones and the ways to work with them. We'll do it step by step, and I'm pretty sure you'll fall in love with those little bits just like I did. So stay with me. Let's build some guitars. Hi, I'm Yoav, and this is the Electric Luthier. Today, we'll go over the important facts you want to know about router bits for building electric guitars. I'll show you the must-haves with different options, as well as my favorite, the budget ones. There's a handful of router bits which will give you all the versatility you need for building electric guitars. These are the flush trim bit, aka the template copier, the straight carbide tip, the chamfer or round over bits, and the rabbet bit with multiple bearings. There are a few variations in sizes to these, and there are a few more which can help in very specific situations depending on the type and style of guitar you're building. Plus there's a bonus one I'll mention at the end. But let's roll back a bit and see how the router bits work. Basically, the router is a fast rotating motor with a rotating sharp blade that has a distinctive profile. The shape of the blade profile is etched into the wood. Some of the bits have a bearing guide and some don't. The purpose of the bearing is to follow the edge to maintain its line and to give an accurate and predictable finish. It's not always obvious, but if you look at bit sets or sales pages of routers, you'll usually give an indication of what the outcome is going to look like. Just so we're on the same page, let's look at the anatomy of the router bit. The shaft runs through the length of the bit. Shafts can come in a few standard sizes. Usually it's 1/4, 3/8, or 1/2 inch, or the equivalent in millimeters. Make sure you get the right size that matches your router. Adapters are available, but are not advisable. Trust me, they rarely fit well enough to provide the grip you want to your router bit. And any motion of the bit from its place while working can mean bad news for your guitar and may even be dangerous. Every bit will also have a blade itself, which will determine the shape and the purpose of the bit. The blade will usually be one piece with the shaft for strength. Then, depending on the type of bit, you may have the bearing. Lastly, you may also have an Allen screw to keep the bearing in place. The basic build of the bit can have variations such as a top-mounted or double-mounted bearing, but most bits are fairly simple and straightforward. If you like where this is going, hit the subscribe button, and if you want to get notified, there's the bell as well. You're also welcome to visit my website, theelectricluthier.com, with tons of more information for the aspiring guitar builder. Let's see where these bits can come handy in the guitar building process. Well, first we have the template copier. We copy the template to the guitar body and neck. This works for pretty much all guitar shapes and sizes. Wherever you have a reference from a template or even just a long straight edge, a template copier will give you an almost perfect cut. It's great for the body outline, pickup cavities, if you have a tremolo, the neck, or the headstock. The benefit is that it saves you a lot of accurate cutting and even more grinding, planing, scraping, and sanding. For cavities, it saves you even more carving. When using this bit, your main consideration is adjusting the depth of the blade so that the bearing will comfortably roll on the template and the blade will cut the wood. The main issue when using it with a handheld router is holding it level to avoid an outward tilt which could put a gash on the side of the wood. Other than being careful, you can avoid this by using a table router or by installing a wider base with possibly a second handle for stability. That's what I did, and you can see the video in the description or the link up here. Generally, it's good practice, especially if you're not used to routers, to route shallow portions and go a little deeper every time. It's easier on the router and on your hands if you're holding the wood, if it's a table router. As a rule of thumb, the more wood you're taking off, whether in depth or thickness, the more you're demanding from your router, your blade, and your hands. The longer version will complete the task faster, but requires a strong router and more effort on your part. The harder the wood, the more that will be true. The shorter blades will be easier to work with and will require less force from both you and the router. You will have to do more passes and adjust the depth of the blade each time. From the second pass on though, you can actually run the bearing on the first routed area and not the template itself. The straight carbide tip looks similar to the template copier, but without the bearing. This is the one you'll use on all guitars to create the channel in the neck where the truss rod will fit. A 6mm will work for most truss rods. Since it has no bearing, it'll require a guide or a jig to constrain it to the correct line. With a very steady hand, you can use it for freehand routing of cavities, but a template will usually give you a more accurate and consistent result. It's always safer and easier to pre-drill most of the material and just leave the final sliver for the router. The exception would be if you have a strong plunge router, and even then many would prefer pre-drilling with a good Forstner drill. Next up are the chamfer or round over bits. A sharp planed edge can cut your fingers and also easily chip off. Many guitars will keep it fairly straight and may just sand the hard edge or even add bindings, but others, such as standard Strats, have a more significant rounding to their edges. These will usually come with bearing so that the blade will stay flush with the side. When mounting and adjusting this bit, you need to make sure the top part is also flush with the base. You may get a step if it protrudes too far out. The radius is predetermined and round over bits will come in different radii. You'll need as many as the number of radii you want. As with any other bits, it's best to start with small gentle strokes to get a feel for the force needed and the possible kickback. If you gravitate more to binded edges than rounded ones, you will want the Rabbet Bit with multiple bearings. It works much the same way as the template copier, but with the blade having a larger radius than the bearing, and therefore cutting a little deeper. The depth is adjusted by changing the bearing to smaller or larger radius. If the bearing is very close to the blade size, you'll get a very thin indent. A small bearing will cut deeper. There are many variations on size and radius of blades, and it will depend on your router and the way you use it, which will be preferable for you. I like to experiment with cheaper bits and then see which ones I want to invest in. Really good bits can be quite expensive, but are definitely worth it in the long run. But when you ruin an $8 bit or $10 bit, or just realize you want a different size or variation, it's not a big deal. A quality bit can set you back upwards of $60 and even over $150 for fancy fluted or multi-bladed ones. They will give you a better, cleaner cut, and they will handle harder woods with more ease and may last you a lifetime. But if you're just going to build a guitar or two, a $12 bit may be good enough. Before I get to the bonus bit, I have to give the mandatory safety warning when working with tools such as routers. The router is the one tool with the fastest rotating blade in your shop and can do a lot of damage very quickly when mishandled. A few weeks ago, a friend nearly lost a couple of fingers on a planer. I'll spare you the pictures, but please exercise caution and use protective gear at all times. Also, if you care about your bits and your fingers, don't just throw them away in a box or a drawer. Make the effort to have them sorted and separated so you don't stick your hand in there and cut yourself. I'm not going to get too deep into routing direction for both safety and less chipping, but I will just say that as a rule, you always want to feel like you're pushing the router and not being pulled by it. The same goes for wood if you're on a table. A table router is usually very strong and can send your lumber flying away if you let it. And that's also when your hand is going to be way too close to the blade. Now you can achieve pretty much everything I'm talking about today with old school manual tools. And if you're that type of luthier, my hat's off to you. But that's another video altogether. On the other end of the spectrum, there's the CNC machines, which are basically computerized routers. But what's the fun in that? Routers are great at saving a lot of time while still being versatile and affordable. Now my bonus bit is actually a fairly simple round over bit with a bearing, but I use one with an uneven radius of about 21 millimeters, which is close to 0.8 of an inch. And this is the point, I use it for the neck. Now you can find different radii variations, but the idea is that if you run this bit on the back of the neck, you get a beautiful deep profile shaped neck right off the bat. This may be right for you, but even if you want a rounder shape profile and more of a V profile or even an asymmetrical profile, this basic D shape will give you a great even starting point. If you're looking for a more specific neck, you can probably find just the right bit that'll get you 90% of the way there, if not even better. Do make sure you have enough support for your router. If you're using a handheld router, you have a very thin base and one little wobble can ruin your neck. A table router is probably the better choice for this task. The world of router bits is wide and deep, and I encourage you to carefully dive into it and experiment. These 4 or 5 bits can give you a good start and save you a lot of time when building an electric guitar. You can check all the bits I mentioned in the description below. And that's it for today. If you want more information about building electric guitars, articles, and free downloadable scale charts, make sure you subscribe. Check out the links below and come visit us at theelectricluthier.com.